Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Prapta Sakalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Charanaravinam Vande Gurashi Charanaravinam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Romancha Kampasru Taranga Baju Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Vande Gurashi Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Niramarjanadu Dana Nityanana Shingaratanama Joktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Vande Gurashi Chaturvidhashri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidhashri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kridvaiva Tripte Bhajatu Shadeva Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shiradikama Gabayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Swa Danalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Ne kunjayono Ratikali Siddhai Jayali Bhir Yuktir Apekshaniya Ne kunjayono Ratikali Siddhai Jayali Bhir Yuktir Tatrati Daksha Ati Bhalabhasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Sakjadhari Dena Shamasta Shashri Ruktastathava Vataiva sadvi sakyadari dena samasta shastre Kintu pravarja priya eva tasya Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Dayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Dayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Swami Nitya Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Vachatyare Shatarine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vachatyare Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Gauranga, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Gaura Premanande, Hare Ram Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Namah Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Ram Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Shri Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhi Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman Nittai Gaur Haribo 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 Nittai Gaur Haribo 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 Nittai Gaur Premanande Jai Vishnupada Paramita Prabhupada Saraswati Mata. His Divine Grace Abhacharabhina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siromani Gaura Priya Jana Krishna Prima Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Vargapati Udhara Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Jayananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Se Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shubhasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Jai Param Dayala Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Jai Premanama Sankirtane Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Satchinanda Nishman Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahavrana Avatar Ki Jai. Golokera Premadhan Harinam Sankirtan Jaya Ki Jai. Yoga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. Brihat Nidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai. Shishyu Radha Krishna Gopakutna Radha Kund Syamakund गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय, श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय, जलो शिव शिष्य राधा नीलमाधव की जय, शिष्य मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय, परम करुणा शिष्य गौर निताय की जय, श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय, श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु, श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय, भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन करण सिंगरे भगवान की जय, जय गंगा माई जमुना माई की जय, तुलसी महारानी वृंदी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय, जय श्रीमती राधा रानी की जय, समवेत भक्तवृंद की जय, निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे हरि। All glories to the assembly bodies, all glories to the assembly bodies, all glories to the assembly bodies, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Guru Hari ki jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Praladadaine.
Praladala.
Hiranyakashipurvakshaha.
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vivai Priye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavakane Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Krishna Tulasi
Namo Namaha Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Ye tomar sharanalo Tara mancha purna tomar sharanalo Tara mancha purna Kripa kori koro tare Vrindavana bhasi Moraeya Bilas kunje dhiyova Moraeya Bilas kunje dhiyova Nayane rivo sada Jugal ruparasi Nayane Dharo Sakiranugata koro Ei nivedana dharo Sakiranugata koro Devadikara jiye Koro nija dasi Devadikara तुम्हें सेवा अधिकार दिए करो निज दासी सेवा अधिकार दिए करो निज दीना कृष्ण दास को ये नमोरा दीना कृष्ण दास को ये नमोरा श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा जिन भासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा जिन भासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा जिन भासी तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी ज्ञानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपदे पदे ज्ञानि कानि च pare yani kani cha papani brahmahatyadikani cha tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pradipade yani kani cha papani brahmahatyadikani cha tani tani Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama. Jaya Tulsi Maharani, 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 Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Jaya Jaya Gurudev,
Vrindaye Tulasi Devaya Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradide Shatavandaye service of Shishi Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of his wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, making resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence, pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavadhyamsa Subraj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me a one-man servant. This very full and Lord is servant Krishna praise. May I always sing aloud Shishi Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrindari Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai Chaitodatpanam Majanam Bhavamada Vagni Nivapanam Shreyakari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Badhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Padiparam Purnamrita Shradanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Shaktis Tatrapitani Amitashmarane Nakala Itadrusitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam Idrishamiyajani Nanuraga Vinada Pisunijana Karorati Sarishana Amani Navanadina Kirtaniya Sagari Na dhanam na janam na sundarim Kavitam va jagadishaka maye Mama janmane janmaneshwari Bhavatar bhakti rahaitu kitvai Ainandatanu kinkaram Paritamam vishame bhavam buddho Kripaya tapapad pankaja Stita dhuli sadrisham vichintaya Nayanam Galorashrudharya Vadanam Gadagarudaya Gira Purakairinchitam Bapukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Juga itam Nemishena Chakrusha Prarusha itam Shunya itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Asri Shabha Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshanar marmahatam karotuva Jata tathava vidadhatulam poto Mat pranatastu saivana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Shinama. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction mode. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested your transcendental energy. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness to enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, think you once of Lord on Stony Street, one should be more turned than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want the cause of the devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some or other I've fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your Lord's feet. Oh my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end, the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and should remain so, even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally.
Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Satani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya.
The arts and offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord should be avoided. They are as follows. 1.
To
blaspheme
blaspheme
the
the
devotees
devotees,
to
to
dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of the demigods and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4.
To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature pursuant to the Vedic version.
5. To consider the chanting, the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider
the chanting of Hare Krishna
is one of the auspicious
ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas as fruit of activities of karma kanda.
9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
And 10.
To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter.
It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against such offenses
in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let's offer our most humble obeisance unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha pattanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Aganya Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksuram Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jadhapachkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupa Sarvakachatam Saguna Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini Shri Saraswati Deve Go Shri Gauravani Harine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shri Varsavanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhale Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Guruvani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Guru Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Panchakalpa Durabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patittanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Bhangur Mamamanda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadambo Jo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpa Drumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestana Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sidvaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahmasamrita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhe Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Masukalpa Riksha Laksha Vrite Susurabira Palyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamana Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Vananda Ravinda Dalayataksam Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Kopi Amaniya Vishesha Sobam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranay Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Chibangalalita Nita Prakasam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vete Sudurlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sobhyasti Yad Prapadasim Yavicintya Tatve Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagadanda Kotim Yes Chakti Rasti Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Ananta Rasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taivya Sampropya Rupa Manima Sanvayam Usaha Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitai Stuvanti Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bistabirya Eva Nicha Rupa Taya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhutto Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadeva Hidesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatistan Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhu To Jagananda Koti Koti Swasesu Vasudadi Vibhuti Menam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hi Yasya Jagananda Satani Sute Traigunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sattva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasuya Praninam Patifalam Smaratam Upretya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chitasya Devi Mahesa Haridama Sute Sutesu Tete Prabhavani Jaya Ritas Jayena Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shrististati Palaya Sadhava Saktareka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga Ichanu Rupam Abhyasya Chachestatesa Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasam Bhutam Apitata Samapaitikar Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Departureva Santarma Bipeta Dipayate Vita Hetu Anudharma Yastadvikeva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami bhajami yakarna narna vajale bhajatisma yoga nidramananta jagaranda saromakubaha adhara saktim avalamya paramstramurtim govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yasyaika nisvasitakala matavalamya chivanti loma vilaja jagaranda nata vishnu mahansa yasya kala visesa govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yas basman yatasma sakalesuna jesuteja swiyam kiyat prakatiyat apitadvatatra brahmaya esa jagadana vidana karta govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yat pada palava yugam vinidaya kumbha twande pranama samayesa ganadi raja vignan vihantam alamasya jagatrayasya govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami agnir mahika ganamambu maruti sascha kalastatatma manasiti jagatrayani asmad bhavanti sancha govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yas chaksuresa savita sakala grahanam raja samasta suramurti rasesa teja yasya gaya brahmati sambrita kajal chakro govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami dharmo tapapa nichaya sutayastapam si brahmadi kita patagava tayasta jivaha yadata matra vibhava pakata pavava govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yastrinda gopa matavendra mahosva karma bandhanu rupa falabhajana matanoti karmani nidahati kinticha bhakti bhajam govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami yam kroda kama sahaja pranayadi bitti vasaya moha gurugora vasavya bhavai sanchintya tasya sadrisima paramapurete govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami sriyakanta kanta parama purisha kalpataravo drumabhumis chintamani ganama itoyam amritam kataganam natyam gamanam apivansi priyasaki chiranandam jyoti parama pitala swadhyam apicha sayatra shiradi bhihishavati shirabi bhyascha sumahan nimay sardakyo vavrajati nahiyatra bisamaya beja swita dvitram tamaham iha golakamitiyam vidantaste santakshiti virachara katipaya ishvara parama krishna sachitananda vigrahana adiraja govinda sarva karana karanam Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the melodies of pure devotion with his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet as such spiritual master. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied being Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. For my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet as such spiritual master. The spiritual master to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet as such a spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. Therefore, I should offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Haribol. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2. Verse number 3. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sakatam Sevaya. Sakatam Sevaya Tasya. Kalena Jarasamgata. Prishtovartam Prati Bruyad. Bhartu Padav Anusmaran. Sa Uddhava Katam how Sevaya by such service Tasya his Kalena in course of time Jarasam invalidity Gata undergone Prishta asked for. Vratam, message. Pratibruyat, just to reply. Vartu, of the Lord. Pado, his lotus feet. Anusmaran, remembering. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Uddhava thus served the Lord continually from childhood and in his old age. That attitude of service never slackened. As soon as he was asked about the message of the Lord, he at once remembered all about him. This is what happens when you think of Krishna your whole life. Anybody asks you a question about Krishna, immediately you remember everything you learned before, and you can speak uninterruptedly for hours and hours and days and days. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Transcendental service to the Lord is not mundane. The service attitude of the devotee gradually increases and never becomes slackened. Generally, in old age, a person is allowed retirement from mundane service, but in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no retirement at all. On the contrary, the service attitude increases more and more with the progress of age. In the transcendental service, there is no satiation. In other words, you don't reach a moment where you say, "Oh, that's enough. I'm getting a little tired of all this." No, one never feels completely satisfied. One just yearns more and more knowledge of Krishna and talking about Krishna and glorifying the Lord. And therefore, there is no retirement. Whoa. Materially, when a man becomes tired by rendering service in his physical body, he is allowed retirement. But in the transcendental service, there's no feeling of fatigue because it is spiritual service and is not on the bodily plane. Service on the bodily plane dwindles as the body grows older. But the spirit is never old, and therefore, on the spiritual plane, the service is never tiresome. Uddhava undoubtedly became old, but that does not mean that his spirit became old. His service attitude matured on the transcendental plane, and therefore, as soon as he was questioned by Vidura about Lord Krishna, he at once remembered his Lord by reference to the context and forgot himself on the physical plane. That is the sign of pure devotional service to the Lord, as will be explained later on. Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya, etc., in Lord Kapila's instructions to his mother Devahuti. Well, this is really a wonderful purport because basically it supports the idea that there's no vacation in Krishna consciousness. And rather than becoming satiated at one point and say, well, that's enough, I've had enough. No, the enthusiasm to hear, chant, speak about Krishna, go on Sankirtan, cook for Krishna, worship the deity, preach to others, it's unending because it has nothing to do with the body. It's pure spiritual activity. Now, as long as we have mixed concepts in our mind about what is Krishna consciousness and what are my needs. So my needs would be selfish needs that are not related to Krishna. But our main concern should be Krishna and not my needs. Because if it's my needs, we will hold back on our progressive path of Krishna consciousness. Now, does that sound wrong? Well, for most people, it would be wrong because they have selfish needs. They have attachments to sense gratification, to family, to nation, to ethnicity, to this political party, for this thing or that thing. So therefore, they cannot experience this unending, increasing bliss, even in old age, of service. So this is talked about. If you look at Brahma's own life, he receives some inspiration from Saraswati, the goddess of learning, Saraswati, who is the divine consort of the Supreme Lord. So, is he talking about, is in the Brahma Samhita in text 24, is he talking about Saraswati, the wife of Brahma, or Saraswati, the consort of Krishna? It's talking about the consort of Krishna. They can be two different persons. Anyway, Saraswati, at one point after Brahma is confused about who he is, what his purpose in life is, he hears this goddess's words, and she says, "O Brahma, this mantra, Klim Krishnaya Gopi Jana Vallabhaya Swaha, will assuredly fulfill your heart's desire." So, he's born with desires, right? And these desires are not all unmixed desires for serving Krishna, because he had a previous life and many previous lifetimes. And therefore, he appears with these unfulfilled desires in his heart. So what are those? What is the desire? Well, the main desire, the principal desire, is he wants to be a controller. He wants to be a creator. He wants to be a controller, a manager. Well, that's from his previous life. So he receives this mantra, Krim Krishnaya Gopindaya Gopijana Vallabhaya Swaha, and she says that it will assuredly fulfill your heart's desire. That means there are two types of desires in the heart. One is for sense gratification, and one is for Krishna. So if we chant this mantra with desires for sense gratification, you will get them. But if we chant it with pure desire to serve Krishna, you'll get it. Now, what happens if you chant it mixed? That's the question. So let's hear what it says here. It says, the mantra, consisting of the 18 divine letters prefixed by the Kama Bija, is alone super excellent. It has a twofold aspect. One aspect is it tends to make the pure soul run after all attractive Sri Krishna, the Lord of Gokula, and the divine milkmaids. He's the Lord of the spiritual world and of the gopis. This is the acme. Acme means the top, the best, of the spiritual tendency of jivas. I mean, this is the best thing that we of jivas can desire, want, and dream about, whatever. This is the best thing. To run after the all-attractive Sri Krishna. When the devotee is free from all sorts of mundane desires and willing to serve the Lord, he attains the fruition of his heart's desire. That is, the love of Krishna. But in the case of the devotee who is not of unmixed aptitudes, meaning who has mixed desires, there's a double negative here, this super excellent mantra fulfills his heart's desire also. That means your material desires. The transcendental Kama Bija, is inherent in the divine locos located in Goloka. And the Kama Bij, pervertedly reflected in the worldly affairs, satisfies all sorts of desires of this mundane world. So Kama Bij means the seed of one's hankering. And if you're hankering for Krishna, then you'll get Krishna. If you're hankering for Maya, you get Maya. Right. So then the next verse says, O Brahma, do thou practice spiritual association by means of this mantra, then all your desires will be fulfilled. So, what is she saying? You should stay in spiritual association. Then all your desires will be fulfilled. Okay, so that's why the association of genuine devotees is the most important thing in a devotee's life. And if anything happens to interrupt that association, it is Maya's trick. So then it says, Brahma, being desirous of satisfying Govinda, practiced the cultural acts for Krishna in Goloka, Lord of Sweta Dwipa, for a long time. His meditation ran thus. Okay, so for hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of years now, Brahma is going to meditate. And what is his meditation? It's the following. There exists a divine lotus of 1,000 petals, augmented by millions of filaments, in the transcendental land of Goloka. On its whorl, that means the top of the flower, there exists a great divine throne on which is seated Sri Krishna, the form of eternal effulgence of transcendental bliss, playing on his divine flute, resonant with the divine sound, with his lotus mouth. He is worshipped by his amorous milkmaids and their respective subjective portions and extensions, and also by his energy, meaning Maya, who stays outside, embodying all mundane qualities. So he's meditating like this for thousands, maybe millions of years, very, very long time. And this is cultural acts for Krishna in Goloka, meditating on his transcendental pastimes. So now, in the purport, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes, although the object of meditation is fully transcendental, yet, owing to her nature, which is permeated with the quality of active mundane hankering, Maya, the non-spiritual potency of Krishna, embodying the principles of mixed sattva, rajas, and tamas in the forms of Durga and other non-spiritual powers, meditated on the Supreme Lord Krishna as the object of their worship. So Maya is also meditating on Krishna, right? So long as there is any trace of mundane desire in one's heart, it is the object of worship of Maya Devi, Durga, who has to be worshipped by such a person. So as long as we have mixed desires, some for sense gratification, some for Krishna, we are actually following Durga, not Krishna. See? And that's why there's so many people that worship Durga, because they have these mixed desires. They have a little desire for understanding Narayana or Rama or Krishna. So they also recite the Ramcharitmanas. I've been in those programs. But then their most enthusiastic thing is Durga Puja, Navaratri, right? So at the end of Navaratri, they recite the Ramayana, the Ramcharitmanas. These are the northern Hindus. I mean, southern Hindus, I guess they have their own Ramayanas also. In north, they always like to hear Ramcharitmanas. In the south, they have a Ramayana in Telugu. They have a Ramayana in the Tamil, and written by different saints. Right? They're all based more or less on the Valmiki Ramayana, but they have their own little take on it, right? Just like Tulsidas has its own particular flavor and thing. And there's some mistakes. There's some spiritual mistakes in Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas. So the original Ramayana by Valmiki should be the one that everyone is reciting. But different saints decided to write their own Ramayana in their own language. So you have Tamil, you have Telugu, you probably have Malayalam and others. Okay, so it says here, so long as there is any trace of mundane desire in one's heart, it is the object of worship of Maya Devi Durga, who has to be worshipped by such a person. Nevertheless, the fulfillment of one's heart's desire results from the worship of the object of the worship of Maya Devi. In other words, whatever we're going to get for our satisfaction as a blessing, it's coming from Krishna. It's not really coming from Maya. She's just a conduit, but it's actually it's just what he's saying here. Nevertheless, the fulfillment of one's heart's desire results from the worship of the object of worship of Maya Devi. The object of worship of Maya Devi is Krishna, and not from the worship of Maya Devi herself. This is in accordance with the sloka Akama Sarvakarmava Mokshakama Udaridi Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajate Purusham Param. The meaning of this sloka of the Bhagavatam is that though other gods, as distinct manifestations of the Supreme Lord, are bestowers of sundry, meaning different specific boons or blessings, yet a sensible person should worship the all-powerful Supreme Lord, giver of all good, with unalloyed devotion, without worshiping those mundane gift-giving deities. In other words, even if you have material desires, you should go to Krishna. Don't waste your time with the demigods, because whatever they're going to give, it comes from Krishna anyway. They don't have anything themselves to give. They have to get it from Krishna and then pass it on to the person. Accordingly, Brahma meditated upon Krishna in Goloka, the object of the worship from a distance of Maya Devi. So why do this? Why would one go to Krishna even if they have material desires? Because ultimately, Krishna is the only one who satisfies people's who gives blessings or gives spiritual or material blessings to people. So you don't have to go to demigods. Right? Now, what's the difference? Well, if you go to demigods, there's very little possibility of getting the blessing of Krishna, spiritual blessing. But if you go to Krishna, there's a great possibility of getting spiritual blessing and losing the desire for sense gratification, because you'll be associating with devotees who will help that person overcome those sensual desires, and worship Krishna without the attachment to the material world. Well, that's the benefit of going to Krishna, even if you go with material desires. But if you go to the demigods with material desires, you could stay birth after birth in that position, which is what happens to most of the demigod worshippers. And you go up and down in the birth and death process in different species. But if you worship Krishna, even if it's with material desires, and stay in the association of devotees, most probably you'll take human birth again and be able to continue your progress in Krishna consciousness. True devotion is unalloyed devotional activity free from all mundane desire. The devotion of Brahma, etc., is not unmixed. It's not pure devotion. Right? But there is a stage of unmixed predilection, even in devotion for the attainment of one's selfish desire. So even if you go to Krishna with material desires, there is some predilection. What is a predilection? It is a preference or a special liking for something. So that means there's something in your heart that is attracted to Krishna. And so that's a predilection, even if you have material desires. But there's a stage of unmixed predilection, even in devotion for the attainment of one's selfish desire. This has been fully described in the concluding 5 slokas of this work, or this Brahma Samhita. That is the easiest method of divine service prior to the attainment of self-realization by fallen souls. What is he referring to as the easiest method? Easiest method is associating with genuine devotees, and even if you have material desires, and going only to Krishna, not going to the demigods, you have a much better chance of getting rid of all those material desires and uniquely worshiping Krishna to glorify him and to serve him. So if we go to the last 5 verses of the Brahma Samhita, I'm not going to read all of them. I'm going to read just the last 2. It says, text 61. So there's how many? There's 61, and then the last one is 62. Yes. Abandoning all meritorious performances, serve me with faith. Well, that's like Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Saranam. It says, give up all your so-called meritorious performances, all your dharmas, Hindu dharma, Muslim dharma, Christian dharma, this dharma, that dharma. Give it all up and just serve me with faith. The realization will correspond to the nature of one's faith. So the position of the devotee is always determined by their faith in Krishna. So some people have very weak faith in Krishna. Some people have mixed faith in Krishna. Some people have mostly pure faith in Krishna. Some people have only pure faith in Krishna. So our position in Krishna consciousness depends on our faith. That means if you have unflinching faith, then you're going to go back to Godhead. Right? Even if you don't practice perfectly. Even if you don't practice perfectly. But you do not lose your faith. Now, usually what happens is, for a person to leave Krishna consciousness, they have to lose their faith for some reason or other in Krishna consciousness. So they have to find a reason. Say, well, this GBC guy, he did this, and that's completely wrong. So I'm not going to have anything to do with Or Prabhupada said, women are less intelligent. I can't accept that. He's a misogynist. Or they have to find some reason. There was this one devotee in Chopadi, and he was a very, very wealthy man, and he was a big benefactor of ISKCON. And he was associating with Prabhupada, and he says, in fact, there's a video of it. He says that he was a businessman. He's a big businessman, right? And he left his body some years ago. But he said, and in business, you have to know and figure out the weakness of a person you're doing business with so that you can take advantage of them. So he said, when I met Prabhupada, I also tried to find some weaknesses in Prabhupada. Right? Because he's a businessman, that's what they do, right? So that they can have the upper hand. And he said, was he attached to sex? Was he attached to money? I was trying to look for his weakness. Instead of trying to serve him, I was looking for a weakness. I was associating with him, right? So he said, this was my mistake. And because of that, I didn't take initiation from him. But after he left, I realized I had made a big mistake trying to find something wrong with Prabhupada. Obviously, he didn't find anything wrong with Prabhupada. And then he took initiation from Radhanath Swami. But he was very attached to Prabhupada, and he gave a lot of money to Chopadi and was helping other temples also. He was a very generous man. One time I gave a lecture in Chopadi, and after the lecture he invited me to their restaurant to have some breakfast together, and we had a long chat. He was a very nice man. Okay, so here we see that it says the function characterized by unalloyed devotion is the real function of all individual souls or jivas. That's who we really are. Having unalloyed, unalloyed means pure devotional service. That's who we really are. And it says, all other varieties of function are activities of the external cases. In other words, anything other than pure devotional service, where it's an admixture, it's mixed with these material desires. These exoteric and esoteric dharmas. So exoteric would be outside of oneself, and esoteric would be inside of oneself. In other words, outside or external desires and deeply embedded internal desires. So these exoteric and esoteric dharmas or functions are manifold. There's a lot of variety in them. That is, non-differential knowledge of the Brahman. Okay, so now he's talking about the different speculations of the darshans. So one is the non-differential knowledge of the Brahman aiming at extinction of individuality. So that is the Mayavadis. And then it says, the Astanga Yoga Dharma having as its goal attainment of the state of exclusive existence, Kaivalya. He's talking there about the mystic yogis. Right? Atheistical fruitive ritualism aiming at material enjoyment. That is the karma yogis, but actually they're not yogis, just people doing karma, right? They call it karma yoga, but it's not really pure karma yoga, right? And then it says jnana yoga dharma, seeking to combine knowledge with fruitive activity. That's another nuance of nonsense, right? And then it says, and the practice of the function of barren asceticism, that is, people who like mutilating themselves due to severe austerity, just like, this is what demons do. Just like there was this one demon, he was worshiping Lord Shiva, and he was cutting off parts of his body and offering it in the fire. So, he cut his left arm off with his right arm, and held it and said, Swaha. And then he cut an ear off, and Swaha, and he cut a nose off, Swaha. And then finally, Shiva wasn't appearing, so he put the knife on his throat, right? And actually, like that, and then Lord Shiva stopped him at that point. And then Lord Shiva is a surgeon, so he put back all those parts of the body that he threw in the fire and said, stop this horrible type of austerity in my name. What do you want? And he said, I want to have the power to, whoever I touch with my finger, their head will blow up into 1,000 pieces. So he said, will you stop this? He said, yes. Okay, so be it. Tatastu. And as soon as he gave him the power, he tried to touch Shiva's head because he wanted to marry, he wanted to grab Shiva's wife, Parvati. Right? Such a rascal. Right? So we see, so that is what he's referring to here. Okay, so then it says, so that was the practice of the function of barren asceticism. Getting rid of all these, serve me by pure devotion rooted in faith. So this, basically, this is an alternate translation of the verse, Sarva Dharmam Parityaja. Get rid of all your dharmas. false dharmas and just surrender unto me. Exclusive faith in me is trust. Faith in the form of trust by the process of gradual purification tends to become a constant engagement, and that's called nishta, strong faith. An object of liking, that's called ruchi, taste for hearing and chanting. Of attachment, a shakti, and real sentiment, bhava. The more transparent the faith, the greater the degree of realization. So when you have transparent faith, you show it, you talk about it, you live it, and people see it. They know this person really has faith in Krishna. Like, for example, Prabhupada comes to America with $7. he showed it, his faith in Krishna. And the lady Morarji, she tried to convince her, don't go, Swamiji, it's very cold there. You will not be able to live there. You will not be able to stand the cold. Yeah, New York in wintertime is extremely cold, right? But probably, no, I have to go. My Guru Dev told me to, I have to go. So she tried to convince him not to go. And finally she saw his determination. So she said, okay. Now that is showing his faith. Yeah, maybe it's freezing cold, and it was freezing cold in the winter. But still, Prabhupada tolerated all that because he had to show that he had faith in his Guru's order to him. He had waited so many years, 30, 40 years. Now he's not going to give up now, because if he gives up now, that means he'll never go. So he had to go, and he had to have that faith. Okay, so then it says, what also will be the nature of the endeavor for the realization of bhakti when the body will perish, consequent on the cessation of the function of the body and of society? So, one should not lose their faith even when the body is dwindling and approaching death, and there's pain, there's sometimes the consciousness gets blurred and so forth. But Prabhupada showed that even in this extreme pain, because of his diabetes and his body falling apart and not functioning, still he was translating right up to the last moment. You have the video on the YouTube, you'll be able to see it. Right up to the last moment, until he gives his last breath, he's preaching and dictating the purport of Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So it says, they will then be of the nature of my service bhakti. So as long as you keep your faith and keep your mind focused on Krishna and Prabhupada and your service, and not being worried about, where will money come from? Where am I going to sleep? What about this? So Prabhupada comes to America. He doesn't know where he's going to sleep. He doesn't know if he's going to have any money or not. Obviously, $7 goes right away. So, but he completely dependent on his Guru and Krishna's mercy, because he had absolute faith. And then it says, mankind live by the threefold activities of body, mind, and society. Eating, sitting, walking, resting, sleeping, cleansing the body, covering the body, etc. are the various bodily activities. Thinking, recollecting, retaining an impression, becoming aware of an entity, feeling pleasure and pain, etc. are the mental feats or features. Marrying, practicing reciprocal relationship between the king and subject, practicing brotherhood, attending at sacrificial meetings, offering oblations, digging wells, tanks, etc., for the benefit of the people, maintaining one's relations, practicing hospitality, observing proper civic conduct, showing due respect to others are the various social activities. So he says, there's threefold, mankind live by threefold activities. Activities of the body, activities of the mind, and activities with society, right? When these acts are performed for one's selfish enjoyment, they are called karma kanda. When the desire for attainment of freedom from activity by knowledge underlies these actions, they are termed jnana yoga or karma yoga. And when these activities are managed to be performed in this way that is conducive to our endeavor for attainment of bhakti, they are called jnana bhakta yoga. That is, the subsidiary devotional practices. But only those activities that are characterized by the principle of pure worship are called bhakti proper. My meditation is practiced in every act when bhakti proper is practiced in due time while performing the subsidiary devotional activities in one's intercourse with the ungodly people of this world. In such a position, a jiva does not become apathetic, meaning very ignoring God to Godhead, even by performing these worldly acts. In other words, you can be functioning in the material world, right? And even you can have daily intercourse with ungodly people. But as long as you perform these subsidiary devotional activities, what are they? They are by meditating on Krishna in every act. That's the whole point. If you keep your mind focused on Krishna in every action that you take, whether it's with the unholy people in your mundane activities or in the temple when you're doing service, as long as your mind is focused on Krishna, then in such a position, a jiva does not become apathetic to Godhead. You don't lose your interest in God, even by performing those worldly activities. This constitutes the practice of looking inward. So there's exoteric and esoteric. So now this is the esoteric thing. You're always looking inward because Paramatma is in the heart. Krishna is in the mind and so forth. So therefore, it says, now this is a big subject. Krishna is in the heart. So Prabhupada says in Bhagavad Gita lecture on 2.1 to 11, verses 1 to 11, in Johannesburg, October 17th, 1975, he says, although he was forced to fight by the opposite party, who were very near, thick and thin people, and he had to kill them, so it was not very satisfactory to him. Therefore, he flatly denied to fight. This is Arjuna, right? Krishna, I am not going to fight. He left his weapon, and then Krishna was surprised that my friend, Arjuna, he is denying to fight in my presence. He's saying no directly to the face of Krishna, right? So Sanjaya, the private secretary of Maharaj Dhritarashtra, he was relaying the message which was going on in the battlefield of Kurukshetra by higher process. Nowadays we have got experience of the television, but the another process, antardristi, that is also television. Antardristi means seeing within the heart or inside. So that's what he says here. He says, this constitutes the practice of looking inwards. And now Prabhupada in this lecture is talking about this looking inwards. And he says, this antardristi. You can see the reflection of external activities within your heart, and you can explain them. So Sanjaya, the private secretary of Maharaj Dhritarashtra, he explained that Arjuna was denying to fight. So there is this inside television. It has nothing to do with electromagnetic waves. It has nothing to do with modern technology. There's a technology already in everybody that they can access this inside Krishna net or Krishna television or Krishna internet, right? But it depends on purification. See, we don't realize what we're capable of doing. We say, oh, no, I got to have the cell phone. I got to have the telephone. You don't need those things. If you develop pure Krishna consciousness, you'll be able to see things and hear things very far away by this internal network. because Paramatma is in the heart. See? This is what, if you want to have science, this is the science people should learn about. And it was practiced previously. And we see it as the example of Sanjaya, many other examples. In a lecture on Bhagavad Gita 3.17 to 20 in New York, May 27, 1966, Prabhupada says, and in the middle of Mahabharata, Bhisma Parva, this Bhagavad Gita is inserted, not inserted, practically in the battlefield of Mahabharata. This Bhagavad Gita was spoken. You will be surprised. In those days, television was in the heart. Television. This, I mean to say, battlefield of Kurukshetra was television in the heart of Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra, the father of one party, Duryodhana, and his secretary, Sanjaya, were sitting in the room and they were discussing what happened after this. Just like you get television or radio message in the football ground. What is going on by sound and picture. So the same thing was being reflected in his heart, meaning Sanjaya's heart, and he was in the room. He was explaining the activities of the battlefield. This is the story like that. Sanjaya Uvacha, Dhritarashtra, in other words, he's sitting in Hastinapur in a room, and he's telling Dhritarashtra what's happening hundreds of miles away in Kurukshetra. Right? So I'm not going to read all those quotes, but then there's one very special quote I'm going to read. And he says, this is in Mantra 15, in the 15th, what do you call it? The 15th chapter of Prabhupada in life comes from life, right? And he says, mystic television. Dr. Singh, they now have things they did not have before, like telephones, televisions, airplanes, missiles, and many other new discoveries. Srila Prabhupada. But there are better telephones that they do not know about. In Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya demonstrated this when he was sitting with his master Dhritarashtra and relating all the affairs that were taking place far away on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Sanjaya's vision was actually greater than the telephone. It was mystic telephone. And mystic television. I'm sorry. Sanjaya's vision was actually greater than the telephone. It was mystic television. It was television within the heart, for he was sitting in a room far from the battlefield and still seeing everything that was occurring there. In Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra inquired of Sanjaya, how are my sons and nephews? What are they doing? Then Sanjaya described how Duryodhana was going to Dronacharya, what Dronacharya was speaking, how Duryodhana was replying, and so on. Even though these activities were too far away to be seen by ordinary eyes, Sanjaya could see and describe them through his mystic power. That is real science. Okay, I'm not going to read this so much here, but you get the idea. What the science we have today is vastly inferior to the science that was practiced in the presence of Krishna and is inherent in everyone. We all have the equipment for it in this body. We just don't realize it. Therefore, we think it's not possible. But we have to have faith in the words of the acharyas, and especially Srila Prabhupada. So, then it says, when these acts are performed for one's selfish enjoyment, they are called karma kanda. And when the desire for attainment of freedom from activity by knowledge underlies these actions, they are termed jnana yoga or karma yoga. And when these activities are managed to be performed in this way, that is conducive to our endeavor for attainment of bhakti, they are called jnana bhakta yoga. That is the subsidiary, that means subsidiary, lower devotional practices, but only those activities that are characterized by the principle of pure worship are called bhakti proper. My meditation is practiced in every act In other words, meditating, when it says my meditations, Krishna is speaking here. So when one is meditating on Krishna, when bhakti proper is practiced in due time, while performing the subsidiary devotional activities in one's intercourse with the ungodly people of this world. So it's possible to be meditating on Krishna, even though we're associating with the karmis on our jobs or in mundane activities. In such a position, a jiva does not become apathetic. You don't lose your faith in God when you're always meditating on Krishna, but still involved in associating with karmis in the material world for maintenance of family, etc. In such a position, the jiva does not become apathetic to Godhead, even by performing those worldly activities. This constitutes the practice of looking inwards, looking inside instead of looking outside. That is, turning towards one's real self. Who are we really? We are the eternal servant of Krishna. So once you're convinced of that, you have absolute faith in that, and it's unwavering, then even though you're functioning in the subsidiary devotional practices, meaning still associating with karmis because you have to make a living, but you're meditating on Krishna and you have absolute faith in Krishna, that means that that is called Ishavaisham Idam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tak Tena Bunjitaha Magritaha Kashasvidanam. In Ishopanishads it says Tena Ishatyaktena Visrishtena. The real significance being that if whatever is accepted be received as favor, Valsh Shaft. Okay, this is a high class word. VOUCHSAFED. But it actually means given or granted or revealed or disclosed. But if someone wants to show off they know a lot of English, they would use the word vouchsafed. You want to look that word up?
Yeah, it says grant or disclose.
Yes. As favor vouchsafed by the Supreme Lord. So Bhaktisiddhanta is using that language because he speaks high English. The worldly activity will cease to be such and will turn into service of Godhead, bhakti. So if you're working in the material world, you're associating with the karmis, but you have faith in the words of Krishna and the acharyas, and you're always thinking of Krishna because you're chanting Hare Krishna, you're following the regulative principles, then eventually it becomes pure devotional service. That's what he's saying. The real significance being that if whatever is accepted be received as favor, vouchsafed, or granted by the Supreme Lord, in other words, anything that happens to you can be good or bad. You accept it as Krishna's mercy, right? Then the worldly activity will cease to be such and will turn into service of Godhead, bhakti. So Ishavaisha says, Kurvan eva karmani karma lipyate nare. So that means that so that's the second mantra of Ishopanishad, that you can go on for hundreds and thousands of years like this and not be affected by the material world because of your faith in Krishna and your practices, even though you're associating with karmis. And you won't get any karma because you're offering the result always to Krishna under the tutelage or with the guidance of bona fide spiritual master and masters. If the worldly acts are performed in the above manner, one does not get entangled in karma even in hundreds of years of worldly life. That's the second mantra of Ishopanishad. The meaning of these two mantras, in other words, the first mantra, Ishavaishamidam Sarvam, and the second mantra, Kurvan Eva Karmani. The meaning of these two mantras from the jnana point of view, from the point of view of knowledge, is renouncement of the fruits of one's worldly actions. But from the bhakti point of view, they mean the attainment of Krishna's favor prashadam by their transfer to his account. In this method, which is the path of archana or worship, you should do your duties to the world by the meditation of worshiping Godhead thereby. Brahma cherishes the desire for creation in his heart. If that creative desire is practiced by conjoining the same with the meditation of obeying therein the command of the Supreme Lord, then it will be a subsidiary spiritual function, guna dharma, being helpful for the growth of the disposition for the service of the divinity by reason of its characteristic of seeking the protection of Godhead. Okay, so basically he's saying here that if you're functioning in the material world because you have responsibilities, you need to make money, etc., but you're always meditating on Krishna and always offering the result of your activities to Krishna, then you're not going to be affected by that bad association. And eventually, it'll turn into pure devotional service. Okay. Haribol. So even if you could perform these Satyanarayana pujas and things like that, as long as you have the help of bona fide guru, you will not be affected. Like for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say your family has strong attachment to these rituals, and they force you to do a Satyanarayana puja. You'll not be affected by it because you will offer the result to Krishna, and you will not think about this is for me. Right? So there's always some purity even in an impure thing. But the idea is to manifest it by associating with genuine devotees and getting their help to not become a karma kandi. Right? Most people will refuse that help, but devotees will accept it because of their faith that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
I have one question regarding the faith. So can we understand that if a devotee has a strong faith, he is not attacked by Maya?
Someone who has strong faith, is not attacked by Maya.
Maya, yeah.
Yes. And this is explained in the different places in Bhagavad Gita, but we'll just take one quick look in the 4th chapter. It says, Ajnascha Sadadanasya Samsayatma Vinasyati Nayam Lokostina Parona Sukham Samsayatmanaha. It says, but ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor the next. So, if you doubt the statements of Bhagavad Gita, like you have all the internal equipment to have a mystic television in your heart, and someone says, that's nonsense, what are they talking about? You know, there's nothing in the heart, there's just blood vessels and a pump. This saying God is in the heart. I mean, I don't see God in the heart. No surgeon has ever seen God in the heart, so I don't believe it. So yeah, then it says, for the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world or the next, right? But a faithful man, but the previous verse says, Shadala labhate jnanam tat para samyatendriya jnanam chayad talam labha param santim achiren adigachati. It says, a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. So, one is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness, he can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. That means this should not engage in sense gratification. You have to control the senses, including the mind. The mind is the sixth sense, right? You have to control the mind and the senses. A person who's faithful to Krishna and who controls the senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. So this is verses 39 and 40 in the 4th chapter. So, how do you get faith, such strong faith? By associating with people who have such strong faith. You don't get it by associating with people who have little faith or no faith. So tell me who your friends are. I can tell you who you are. So if you're associating either on the internet or television or radio or in life with people of little faith or no faith, then that's going to affect you. It's going to affect you. And there's happiness neither in this world or the next.
Maharaj, in case of Bharat Maharaj,
there's no happiness either in this world or the next.
So in case of Bharat Maharaj,
In case of what?
Bharat Maharaj, so he
Bharat Maharaj.
but he deviated from his service towards the attraction of the lady, the deer, right? The sense of touch.
Yeah.
So that means in his case, so he has the strong faith in Lord and he was doing the service with determination, but
But he developed bad association.
with the deer, okay.
Yeah, with that little fawn. It's a baby deer. And he went crazy. He gave up his devotional services. It interrupted his devotional services. He was always worried about, where is she now? Oh, she might get hurt. I got to go look for her, you know. He went crazy because of affection for that deer. Okay? So if we have some affection for the body of another person, it could be a deer, it could be a dog, it could be, you know, a man or a woman or whatever, then it will weaken our faith tremendously to the point where, like Bharat Maharaj, would be thinking of that animal or person at the moment of death, and we don't go back to Godhead. Take birth. You have a question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Maharaj, so how neophyte can internal television? Is it because of weak faith? A neophyte has no access to this internal
You
television.
access it by pure devotional service, having no other interest in life than serving the Lord. Now, in our case, because you're married, or whether you're going to be engaged in subsidiary devotional service. But you keep doing it, it'll turn into pure devotional service. The mystic television, the Krishna net. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Shri Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Koriya Kya Arana Koriya Mane Asa Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagati Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa Chakshudan Dilaje Janmi Janmi Prabhu se Divye Gyani De Prokasito Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasajate Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasajate Vede Gai Jana Charito Shikuru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokena Lokera Jivana Lokena Lokera Jivana Ha Prabhu Kora Doya Deha More Padachaya Ha Prabhu Kora Doya Deha Padachaya Ebeas Kusati Bhuvanana Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namah Vishnu Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Molo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitya Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitya Gora Hari Bol. Gora Premanandi Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parivrajagatchasthatana Saptarishi, Shrimad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sikho Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri, Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavana Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad, Namaste Saraswati Devi. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which you can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet in great honor and reverence. By your grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth for he experiment prayers. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures in this character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavana Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna.